Good day, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my virtual classroom. For today's video, I'm gonna be talking about historical criticism. So let's move. So when we speak of historical criticism, this examines the origins of the earliest text to appreciate the underlying circumstances upon which the text came to be. Okay, and of course to examine this text if it's really original. Okay, it has two important goals. Number one is to discover the original meaning of the text in its primitive or historical context, and of course its literal sense, or in other words we call it sensus literalis historicus. Again, sensus literalis historicos, or historical or literal sense. Okay. Second is to establish a reconstruction of the historical situation of the author and of course the recipient of the text who will be reading. Okay. We'll be looking at this text. So historical criticism has two types, and these are the external criticism and the internal criticism. Okay, and we're going to define this and discuss this later. Historical criticism has its roots in the 17th century during the Protestant Reformation, and this gained popular recognition in the 19th and the 20th century. The absence of historical investigation paved the way for historical criticism to rest on philosophical and theological interpretation. The passing of time has advanced historical criticism into various methodologies used today. So to name a few, we have source criticism. Anong ibig sabihin nito? This analyze and studies the sources used by biblical authors. Then we have form criticism. So ano naman tong form criticism? This seeks naman to determine a unit original from the historical context. Okay? Historical context of the literary tradition. And then we have the reduction criticism. Ang reduction criticism disregards the author of the text as editor of the source materials. Pero kung i-define natin ang reduction, hindi yan reduction na reduction, reduction criticism talaga yan. In the sense, ang reduction criticism talaga is the study of theological perspective of a biblical text, evident in its collection, arrangement, editing, and modification of sources. So pag sinabi nating theological perspective, ibig sabihin this is biblical. Okay, reduction criticism. So yan yung mga tawag nito, yun ang mga pinag-ugatan ng historical criticism. Then we have traditional criticism or tradition criticism rather. So this attempts naman to trace the developmental stage of the oral tradition from its historical emergence to its literary presentation. From the oral or verbal, so yung pasalin-salin ng kwento, so naging ano siya, so nagkaroon ng emergence ng history and then nailipat sa panulat. Okay? So tradition criticism. And then we have the fifth one is canonical criticism, which focuses its interpretation of the Bible on the text of biblical canon. So if you're going to look at it, reduction criticism and canonical criticism, meron silang parang similarity, but not so related. Kasi ang reduction criticism, it's more on the theological perspective, which is also focusing more on ang canonical naman is on the Bible or text of the biblical canon and other related methodologies. Okay, I hope you are uh, getting across. So we have two parts of historical criticism. Okay, so just have to take note of some of the concepts, okay, or some of the things that I am talking about. So the first part is to determine the authenticity of the material. Pag sinabi natin authentic, okay, authentic, hindi siya peke, tunay siya, okay, or called provenance. I'll repeat, the first part of historical criticism is to determine the authenticity of the materials or of the material or also called provenance of the source. So the critics should determine the origin of the material. So titingnan nila yung pinanggalingan. Its author, sino ba ang nagsulat nito? And of course, the source of information's used. Kasi hindi pwedeng lalabas lang dyan yung history na hindi naman talaga siya chinek. Okay, so critics should determine the origin of the material, saan nga ba ito nanggaling, sinong author nito, and the source of information. And then, external criticism is used in determining these facts. Okay, itong pag tinitingnan na yung material, tinitingnan na yung author at source kung saan siya galing, ginagamit na dito yung external criticism. Okay? So the second part is to weigh the testimony to the truth. Anong ibig sabihin ng to weigh the testimony to the truth? So the critic must examine the trustworthiness of the testimony as well as determine the probability of the statement to be true. So, titingnan kung yung tama, totoo ba yung testimonya. Okay? So, this process is called naman internal criticism or higher criticism since it deals with more important matter than the external form. Kasi pa external, yung panlabas lang, kaya nga external eh. Okay? So, let's dig deeper on the two criticisms. We have the external and internal. Unahin na natin yung external criticism. So, pag sinabi external criticism, this determines the authenticity of the source, the authenticity of the material. Okay? At ito ay pwedeng i-test sa dalawang paraan. This could be tested in two ways. By paleographical. Anong ibig sabihin ng paleographical? Ito yung deciphering and dating of historical manuscript. Checking the manuscript. Okay? Deciphering kung kailan to nangyari and etc. So, we have also diplomatic criticism. So, critical analysis of, pag sinabing diplomatic criticism, this is critical analysis of historical documents to understand how the document came to be and the informations transmitted and the relationship between the facts reported in the document and the reality. Okay? So, again, pag sinabi nating diplomatic criticism, critical analysis of historical documents to understand how the document came to be. And of course, the material must be investigated based on the time and place it is written. The critic must also determine whether the material under investigation is raw, meaning hindi siya na-alter, hindi siya nabago. Okay, so material under investigation is raw, meaning unaltered, and it exists exactly as the author left it. Okay? So hindi ganon hindi ganon kadali when you are of course publishing a report or publishing a historical account, hindi ganon siya kadali. So, maraming pinagdadaanan siya. Specifically if you are using sources of history. So the content must be viewed in every possible angle. As forgery was not unknown during the Middle Ages. So, alam naman natin ang forgery, di ba, pamimeke. Hindi pa kasi siya dati kilala. Hindi pa alam kung ano ang tawag sa pamimeke nung mga panahon ng nung Middle Ages. So the authority of the material can be examined from other genuine sources having the same subject or written or in written form during the same period. So the similarities or sabihin nating agreements, the differences or disagreements, may mga ganyan, of some common details, such as the culture and the traditions and events during the period by which the document was made can be a basis for judging the authenticity of the text. So, ayan ang external criticism. So, ano naman ang internal criticism? Pag sinabi naman natin na internal criticism, this determines the historicity. This is the word, historicity of the facts contained in the documents. So it is not necessary to prove the authenticity of the material or document. However, the facts contained in the document must first be tested before any conclusion pertaining to it. So in determining the value of the facts, the character of the source, the knowledge of the author, and the influences prevalent at the time of writing must be carefully investigated. Must be carefully investigated rather. So it must also be ascertained that the critic knows exactly what the author said. And he must understand the documents from the standpoint of the author. So mahirap din maging kritika, internal critic. So moreover, the facts given by the author or writer must be firmly established as having taken place exactly as reported. So sa internal criticism, kaiba hindi lang yung material, yung panglabas ang titingnan. Okay? So in this particular criticism, ito na yung tinitingnan yung loob. Okay? So it must be the critic knows exactly what the documents is talking about. And of course, from the standpoint of the author. Say for example, yung huling pamaaalam ni Jose Rizal. Okay? Specifically, the poem. Okay? So, if meron silang nakuha na, na sulat, halimbawa, authentic na letter, ni Jose Rizal na nakuha doon sa pinangyarihan. So, externally, pwedeng makritik yun. Okay? But of course, what the historians talked about this particular piece, so dito na papasok yung internal criticism. Okay? So ngayon dumako tayo sa test of authenticity. So ano nga ba yung test para malaman kung genuine yung document? Okay? So historians ay meron dapat silang mga paraan kung paano to malalaman. Okay, so to distinguish a hoax or misrepresentation, di ba, na-discuss before yung Kodigo ni Kalanchaw. At pati yung issue ni Marcos na decorated soldier siya during those wars. Tapos napatunayan na hindi naman pala totoo. Okay, so to distinguish a hoax from a genuine document, the historian must use test. Okay, parang sa police and legal detection. So making the best guess if the date of the documents, he or she examines the materials to see whether they are not anachronistic. Okay, paper was rare in Europe before the 15th century. Wala pa nung masyadong papelos. Dapat alam ng mga detalye na gano'n. And printing was unknown, so wala pang mga pa-print-print noon. Pencils did not exist before the 16th century. So typewriting was not invented during the 19th century. So kapag may lumabas na typewriter at kiniklaim na ito yung hindi yan totoo kasi noong mga panahon na yon wala pa, mga ganon. So ito yung mga knowledge. Okay, ito yung mga knowledge na dapat alam. Okay, para matest. Kasi pag sinabing, ito, sulat ni Jose Rizal na naka-pencil o ganyan. That time, hindi pa pala nag-exist yung pencil. Okay, and Indian paper came only at the end of that century. Okay, so the historian also examines the inks for signs of age or of an anachronistic chemical composition. So, tinitingnan din to. Okay? Yung mga ginamit na pirma, baka ito ay peke. Sinabi lang. Okay? So yan, I hope you are getting across. So, making the best guess of the possible author of the document, he or she sees that she can identify the handwriting, the signature, the seal, the letterhead, or watermark, even when the handwriting is unfamiliar. So it can be compared with authenticated specimens. So one of the unfulfilled needs of the historian is more of what the French call isographies or the dictionaries of biography giving examples of handwriting. So for some period of history, experts using techniques known as paleography and diplomatics have long known that in certain regions, at certain times, handwriting and the style and form of official documents were conventionalized. So the disciplines of paleography and diplomatics were founded in the 17th century by Dom Jean Mabillon, a French Benedictine monk and scholar of the Congregation of Saint Maur. So seals have been the subject of special study by sigilographers. An expert can detect fake ones. So anachronistic style can be detected by specialists who are familiar with. So connecting this to the present time. Okay, so at this point in time, social media na tayo, nasa modern times na tayo. But still, may mga fake announcement, may mga fake accounts, may mga fake published historical events or whatsoever. So ngayon dapat you should also know how to detect or um how to know if a certain news or a certain story is fake or real. Okay? So that is now the challenge in this modern times. Okay? I hope you learn from what I am discussing. So often spelling, particularly of proper names and signatures, reveal forgery, as would also an historic grammar. So ito yung mga red flags. Okay? Mali-mali ang spelling, yung mga proper names and signatures. Ayan. So these are already red flags. So pwede itong mali. Anachronistic references or events, too early or too late, or too remote, or the shafting of a document at a time when the alleged writer could not possibly have been at the place designated. No? So mayroon siyang alibi or uncovers fraud. Sometimes skillful forger has all the copy in certain passages. Meron siyang mga copy lahat-lahat. And by skillful paraphrasing and invention, he or she is given away by the absence trivia. And otherwise, also known as details from his manufactured account. Yan, dami, mapapaniwala ka talaga. Okay, however, usually if the document is where it ought to be, in a family's archives or incomprehensible in the governmental record, its provenance creates presumption of genuineness. Kaya nga sa natin, sa readings of Philippine history, we will be talking about issues in the history. Like, saan nga ba ang unang misa sa Pilipinas? Okay, so ang account na ibigay sa atin, alam natin kung nasa Limasawa nagkaroon ng um, unang misa. But how are you going to criticize the documents that came out and it says that the first mass may be in Butuan? Okay? So pag-uusapan natin yan sa mga susunod na lessons natin. Okay, so before I end, you have to answer all these activities. Okay? So it is found at the end of the video. So you know what to do, you know the drill. So thank you so much for listening and thank you so much for tuning in. See you again next time. Goodbye, everyone.